KNUS, and we're pleased to have back with us Lindsey Singer, caller Rising Action. Lindsey, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me back on to talk about this.
Oh,
You
yes.
bet.
Before we get to it, let's just go ahead and we'll just play it, the clip. So, former governor, former presidential candidate, current Senate candidate, John Hickenlooper sat down an interview with Channel 9, and they were asking him about this ethics investigation, which frankly has been going on for far too long, I think.
No, I think it should keep on going on.
Well, but I mean, it's like they could have gotten the answers.
No, this is perfect.
All of that aside.
Don't screw this up, Julie.
But at some point, Hickenlooper incredulously is stunned that they're even asking about this and saying, you should be protecting me from
Journalists
this.
should be protecting me. All journalists should
And
be
at
doing
first I thought he was joking, but then when you listen to it, he's not. So, Lindsey, let us play it, and then we'll get your reaction to it.
Great.
Play
You
it,
guys
John.
should be protecting me on stuff like this, where there's no clear. How could they meet? What's the confusion? That I had a private meeting? No, there were no private meetings. That I somehow saved money myself? I wasn't going to pay for that plane ticket. I saved the state money. You know, I'll be very surprised if they come back and say in any way this is unethical.
So, Lindsey, your reaction, Lindsey.
Yeah, it's just so shocking every time you hear it, right? I mean, for a politician to say that the media should be protecting him, kudos to 9 News for playing that full interview on the air
Right.
and talking about it and bringing some light to this. Because, we have ethics laws in place for a reason, and Hickenlooper obviously, by his reaction, is telling the people that he's above those laws and, they shouldn't apply to him and the media should really be defending his actions.
Right, and what he does when you listen to the full interview, it's kind of astonishing, or the full report anyway. He talks about, these ethics laws, they're confusing. It's hard to clarify.
No kidding. Scott Gessler probably
so-
thinks the same thing, and so do almost anybody else who's run afoul of him, all of which is the courtesy of Jared Polis.
Right, and then he says, you guys should be protecting me from this because these are, frank,
I'm a Democrat.
fraudulent complaints, and yet he ignores the fact that the Ethics Commission, which I think really is, I think he's right. They're not going to find he did anything wrong, but that's because I have suspicions about them anyway. But I mean, they felt, it was necessary to continue looking at it. They didn't throw it out. But Lindsey, to me, it's sort of like John Hickenlooper all along, I think, has had difficult time when people question him or when he's not the most, as somebody said, popular Democrat in the room.
Yeah, he's had a long history. That's a really good point. He's had a long history of combating press who ask him questions that he doesn't like or disagree with him in some way. Most recently he was on air with Dan Kaplan,
Oh,
a
that was
conservative,
hilarious.
another conservative radio
Right.
talk show, and he was asked about abortion, which was a huge. While he was running for president, it was a huge national topic at the time. Completely reasonable to be asked about that. Any politician who's in an interview should be expected to be able to answer any of those questions. And, he refused to talk about it because he wanted to talk about gun control. So,
Right.
But the big issue here is that these ethics laws, they're not confusing, and they're in place for a reason.
they are confusing. Let me promise you, they are confusing and BS. And the Ethics Commission is confusing and BS, and it's run by a guy who's really morally suspect. But what he did probably isn't close. I mean, you're not allowed to have others pay for your trips. So you had others pay for your trips. Say, well, I could have had the state pay for it, but you didn't, John,
Right, or he said
and therefore you
going,
violated it.
What his other thing was, they were going anyway. So
We're
I just
going
went with them.
anyway.
So.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's how the rules work. Yeah. What's so funny about Dan Kaplan is he used to be on Craig and Dan's show all the time. In fact, co-hosted
Governor
at a time,
Hickenlooper.
Governor Hickenlooper. And then they asked him a question about his charitable giving, and they said, well, wait a minute, that's a conservationism, and he never came on again until years later after the show. He went on with Craig, but then going with Dan, he expected, okay, now Dan's going to really suck up to me. And he didn't. He asked him, I don't think a terribly tough question about abortion, and he just squirmed and just gave up. He ain't coming back.
The other interview you're talking about, he actually even said that he had told those companies, he had promised them that he wouldn't divulge the names of the companies he's given to, so he couldn't say that. But what I mean is the idea behind having these ethic laws in place for politicians is very simple. It's to stop the politicians from being bought by corporations and special interest groups. And so belittling the law like John Hickenlooper is doing is like a real slap in the face for Colorado voters.
He didn't have a problem when, Secretary of State Wade Williams gets dinged and investigated for buying a cowboy hat and expensing it that he wears to the state fair, right? So that's fine. But John Hickenlooper accepting all kinds of flights and airfare and going to the Bilderberg conference and all that kind of stuff, that's okay.
Because the laws
are confusing.
Well, no, it's because, they're only confusing if Democrats run afoul of them. As long as Republicans run afoul of them, they're just very clear. But if a Democrat runs afoul of them, but his was a pretty obvious one. I mean, for all the stuff that goes on, that somebody sat at a luncheon and sat at a table, they ding him for that and ding him for this. The Colorado ethics laws are obscene, and they're all because of Jared Polis pushed the amendment on the Colorado people. But of all the ones that are obvious is you can't take plane rides with other people. I mean, that one isn't very hard. And he kind of goes, they were going anyway. We go, we know that, John. It's not how much more they paid, it's how much you saved. Is that hard for you, John? I said, well, I'm dyslexic, I can't read.
Well, to that point, the ethics investigation is only about 5 trips. And a few of them, the ethics committee isn't looking into, but there were others that Frank McNulty had brought up that were too far in the past, so they couldn't even be looked into. So this isn't just these 5 trips. This is a pattern of John Hickenlooper. It's basically he thinks that that the media should be protecting him, and
that's the hilarious part. That's hilarious. Well, and I wasn't sure. He didn't. He kind of went. The journalists would want to protect him. Why? He never explained the why journalists would want to protect. I mean, he clearly wasn't saying just because I'm a Democrat, but he couldn't think of another reason why journalists ought to be protecting him.
I think it sort of shows a pattern. Big picture, if we see John Hickenlooper talking like this, you see the administration of Jared Polis trying to bully small-town newspapers into not printing stuff.
Right.
It's like any press they don't agree with. There's lots of other examples of Hickenlooper over the years threatening reporters to take away their access over asking about topics he doesn't like. Like there was, a while back, he threatened to take away a Channel 7 news reporter's access over asking about his friendship with the father of a white supremacist who went on to kill a corrections officer.
Wow.
So these are things like that tell a story about John Hickenlooper, and Colorado Rising PAC is going to be talking about them as the campaign progresses.
Well, and let's go back to one of the points too that you made, and that is that Frank McNulty, and we had him on our show, and he outlined a whole series of issues, which all involved. And I remember back when I was at Fox, I think it was at Fox 31, when they did a story there about John Hickenlooper, very early on in his administration, using plane flights and then having to reimburse it. I think he was taking his kids skiing or something like that. And so there've always been questions. He seems to be confused repeatedly on this whole airfare kind of thing. And like you pointed out, Lindsey Singer with Colorado Rising Action, there were other complaints. It's not that they found that they weren't valid. It's just that they were not recent enough for them to look into the situation.
Exactly. And in the meantime, there's times where John Hickenlooper talks about how important it is to be transparent as an elected official. We have a clip up on our YouTube, about him talking about, in this context, it's about tax returns, but about the importance of anyone who wants to be elected to office being transparent and held accountable. And this whole thing speaks to the hypocrisy of John Hickenlooper.
Well, and let's talk too a little bit about, as you said, or as Chuck kind of indicated too, that the implication that, hey, I'm a Democrat, you guys are supposed to be protecting me. I have a feeling, and tell me if you disagree, Lindsey, but you wouldn't have, say, Cory Gardner probably would never occur to him to say, hey, you guys are supposed to be protecting me, because as a Republican candidate, you know that you don't get protection anyway.
Absolutely. I've been working in communications. I've been press secretary for elected Republicans for a number of years, and I can tell you, we would never think of telling reporters that we won't talk about something, because then you're guaranteed to get questions about that topic, right?
Right.
And then if you're on the air, you would, as a politician, having to take votes and take positions on things, you expect to be asked about hard topics. And all of the Republicans I've ever worked for, you just know how to answer those things. And there's no way that the media would, hold on to questions just because it's an uncomfortable topic for you.
Well,
and to think that for John Hickenlooper to think that the to be appalled when the media does that to him is just, it's I'd say funny, but it's really upsetting, actually.
Right, you're right. It's funny that he's kind of, it's like he said out loud what everybody thinks, right? And you weren't supposed to say, oh, did he actually, you say, oh, did I just say that out loud?
Yeah, you can see his campaign for wincing. Oh, no, he didn't say that.
And yet, though, the fact that he did say it out loud, as you said, indicates, number one, sort of his mindset, and number two, his attitude, and I think a Democratic attitude about the media. It's like, hey, but you guys are our lapdogs, right? Yeah. Why are you barking at me? But I do think the plain issue is one. I mean, he flew to this Bilderberg, and they like to make fun of the Bilderbergs. They say conspiracy theories. But the reality is he did fly over there. He did run for president. And there was a connection between the two.
Right.
And he didn't pay for it, and he wouldn't answer questions there.
Right. And the Gazette actually pointed out today in an editorial, again, the connection between some of the trips he took with for Elon Musk's brother, founder of Tesla, and then pretty soon after that we have where Colorado is on the California admissions rules,
right.
Which really benefits the Tesla and the Musk family. So,
but his defense was, I didn't fly with Elon Musk. No, you fly with Elon Musk's son. It's kind of like a Biden
brother.
defense,
Well, it's kind of, and I think he lied, I guess is the only word I would use, because he said, oh, we went to a wedding, but it was like, well, no, the wedding was way before. Am I right there? I mean, the wedding was a separate, kind of separate flight. I mean, he was trying to mislead people about the timing and the connection both.
Yeah, I think you're right. Regardless of the, it's the idea that people see the connection here. That's the problem. It could, if we're trying to give Hickenlooper the benefit of the doubt, which I not normally doing, but if we're trying to do that, then maybe there actually was no connection. He went to this wedding, he partied with the Musks, but there's no connection with the California admissions laws. But the fact that there's an appearance of something fishy going on here, the timing of it,
and he lied about, and is lying about it.
Exactly.
That's
a real problem.
And I think the other thing is too, this is not some, I don't know, rural dog catcher elected official, right? Who maybe doesn't get much in the media eye, has very little, essentially, kind of political experience like this, and no further political aspirations. This is a guy who was the mayor of Denver. He was the governor of Colorado. He was a presidential candidate. Now he's a Senate candidate. I mean, John Hickenlooper, to me, that's one of the bigger things. It raises some questions about, I don't know what his mindset is. I mean, there's got to be a certain.
We know what his mindset is.
There's got to be a certain, I guess, entitlement there, privilege there, and a belief that he is above being questioned. Otherwise, you'd think he would have learned his lesson years ago.
Yeah, he's asking for Colorado's vote again for U.S. Senate. The Democrats in the primary have basically been told by the party not to attack each other. So, there's no real primary happening. Hickenlooper, I can't imagine how frustrating it would be for these other Democrats who talk about it sometimes, but still in debates, they don't attack each other. So basically, Hickenlooper has all this money, and he's most likely going to sail through the Democrat primary. And then he's going to, be faced with another election, and there's still this stuff going on. He feels like he should be protected by the press. And I just hope groups like ours, like people like you guys and the media, keep pounding him. And, the thing I appreciate about John Hickenlooper is he's very prone to say what's on his mind and what's true. And then he walks it back, and then he forgets he's being recorded again, and he says something stupid. So I just hope we keep catching that on tape.
Well, then, Lindsey, so Colorado Rising Action, I know you guys have a YouTube channel. You have all kinds of great stuff. Where can people take a look at some of these clips?
Yeah, so check out Colorado Rising PAC on YouTube, coloradorisingpac.org, and we'll keep talking about John Hickenlooper's U.S. Senate campaign there.
All right.
All right. Lindsey, thank you for your time.
Thanks,
have
Lindsey.
a great afternoon.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.